All right, welcome back to lecture 4.3, and in this lecture we're going to start creating some basic poses and reference poses as well. And to start adding a pose, we're going to start with the arm rig, so select the arm rig in object mode and switch to pose mode. And now we want to select all the bones and keyframe all the bones that we're going to be using. So I usually start with the camera. So select the camera bone here and press I. Oh, and also make sure that you're on the first frame down here. So make sure that this is set on frame 0. The timeline is set to 0 before doing this. And with the camera selected, let's press I and insert keyframes for location and rotation. And now we can see that we have some stuff going on here. And basically what we just did is that we added the default location and rotation as keyframes here. So we can see that the camera now has some keyframes in the action editor, which means that these keyframes represent this location right here. So it's 0, 0, 0. So it's all default. And let's do the same for the upper arm. So let's insert a location. We only need the location. We could also insert rotation, but we won't really be using that, so I think location is just fine for now. And the pole target, so location. And the hand, location and rotation. And then we can select all of the fingers as well and add a rotation keyframe for those. And this is going to insert all of them like this. And let's do the same for the left side. So upper arm, location, pole target, location, rotation. And the hand, location, rotation. And then select all the fingers, hold down shift, select them, and insert the rotation. And now we can see here that they're actually color coded in the action editor too, which could be useful if you quickly want to see, like, okay, this is the left arm, this is the right hand, and so on. So I think we can keep it like this for now with the color coding. I usually disable this because it can get a bit annoying sometimes, but I think it's fine to keep it for now. And yeah, and let's call this one. So when inserting keyframes, it automatically creates a new action. And in Blender, it's called an action, but an action is really another word for an animation. So one action is regarded as one animation. And in this list here, you can actually see when we add more actions, we can see this list filling up. And let's rename this to first person reference. Right, and this is just going to be our reference pose. We can actually call it first person reference pose. Make it a bit more clear. And this is just like the default kind of T-pose with the arms out like this. And I think it's good to have like a reference pose, so you can go back, you can if you like mess up somewhere, you can just kind of restore to these keyframes and you get the default locations. And we also need to check this little icon here, the shield. And I'm not really sure why it's a thing, but in Blender, if you don't check this one, then the animation won't save. So make sure you check that one, because otherwise the animations won't save if you close Blender and open it again. And make sure you save as well, very important. All right, and let's do the same for the gun rig. So go to object mode, select the gun rig and go to pose mode. And let's select the root bone and insert a location and rotation. And select the slide, insert location, and the mag, location, rotation. And as you can see, we got a new action here. And if we click here, we can see there's the FP reference pose, which is the arms. And then we now have the gun action here. So let's rename this one to weapon ref pose. And this is going to be the default position for the weapon or the gun. I suppose we would call it gun too, actually. Makes a bit more sense. Gun ref pose. There we go. And as we can see here, we now have the keyframes set up. So we have the locations, we have the rotations set to their default values. All right, and let's go back to object mode. And now we're going to create the idle pose. And this is just going to be a simple pose that we're going to use for the idle, and kind of like a base pose, if you will. So select the arm rig, go to pose mode, and now we can just start posing. Actually, that's not true. We need to make a new action first. So we want to keep this reference pose as it is. So let's create a new action based on this one. So if we base it on this one, we have all the keyframes set up already. So let's just create a new one, a new action. And let's call it FP idle pose. Don't forget to press the little shield to save it. And we also need to enable this one. And this is auto keying. And basically when this is enabled, it will, every time you move something, it's going to automatically place keyframes. And I think this is very useful. Some people prefer to have it turned off and instead kind of manually doing this every time. And you could do that too, but I think it's a bit easier to have the auto keying on. Right, so let's start creating a pose. Actually, before we do that, we should probably make a idle pose action for the gun as well. So select the gun in object mode and go to pose mode. And duplicate the gun reference pose. And call it gun idle pose. And let's just start by placing out the gun in its correct position. So as we can see on the screen above here, this view right here is what the player is going to see in the game, right? And this is what the camera sees as well. So always reference back to this when you're placing out the weapons and doing animations. And we can keep it somewhere in like the bottom right. It's usually around, around here. You can kind of test, experiment with this and test different locations and stuff to see what looks best. And let's select the first person rig, select the hand, and let's just place it out around here. Oh, and also we can make the render here look a bit nicer by going down here and enabling this one, cavity, and then set to both. And we can actually do it here as well. So if we, how do we bring the menu back? No, not like that. Here. We can do the same here. Just turn it on. And it's going to give us like a bit of a nicer render. We can also turn on the texture preview, so we can see the actual texture. And we can do this by holding down Z. And yeah, ignore this in the bottom left. And we can press Z and choose material preview. Like this. This is what it was before, solid. We can use this one. So we can actually see what the textures look like. And let's just keep placing out the hand here. And kind of position it on the grip. Something like this. Oops. And maybe make the fingers a bit more open down here. And we can select the upper arm, move it down a bit. We can also use the pole target to kind of get rid of this weird elbow rotation. So just move that down. And let's also move the left hand. So let's move it towards the gun. And move this one down. And if this happens, we can fix this by moving the pole target. And depending on how you want the grip to be, I usually put the left hand kind of on the bottom here, so something like this. Yeah, around here I think is good. The important thing is that it looks good here in the first person view, so that's really what you should be focusing on. As long as it looks good here, it doesn't really matter what this one looks like. Like if this arm looks really weird in this view, but it looks fine here, then this is what you should care about, you know? Yeah, so I'm just gonna keep placing this out. And I'm pressing R, selecting the bones, and then pressing RX to rotate it on the x-axis. Let's move this one back a bit. And maybe let's move the gun a bit more to the left and a bit upwards. And maybe a bit closer to, so like this, kind of. And let's move. Let's move these back a bit. I think this looks pretty good. I think this is a pretty solid default idle pose that we can use. Yeah, and since we have the automatic keyframes on, this pose has been saved automatically when we as we move the different bones. And you just need to make sure that you're always on frame 0 when you're doing this, because otherwise there's going to be a bunch of keyframes kind of spread out all over the place, and that's a bit messy. So you want to keep it on frame 0 when you're doing the poses. Yeah, so now we have a reference pose for the arms and the gun, and we also have an idle pose for the gun and the arms. As you can see here too, we have the gun idle pose as well. And yeah, that's all for this lecture. And in the next one, we are going to start animating and placing out some keyframes and working with the graph editor as well. So I'll see you in the next one.